Yeah, I've been in the D community since about the latter half of 2003. And in that time, I've seen a lot of changes, to say the least. But before I came in, there were people who I just don't understand, right? They came in to this language that didn't even exist, all right? And the very first contribution to the D ecosystem happened before the compiler even existed. It was August 12th, 2001. Jan Nepper made the first post in the D news groups because he was hosting the D news groups. Now, Jan had been a C++ compiler user for several years. He knew Walter from emailing him. And when he heard that Walter was starting digitalmars.com, he went ahead and said, hey, let me host your website and host your news groups. So Walter gave him everything, and Jan is still hosting us today. digitalmars.com, dling.org. He's the very first D ecosystem contributor, and I think he holds the title of the longest serving D contributor. And the very next post in the news group was a draft of the D programming language spec, right? Now, again, this is before the compiler exists, right? So Walter puts this out there. Now, is there going to be any activity on this? It's a specification. You can't do anything with it, right? Well, he had these people in his C++ news groups, and a few of them came over to check it out. Not too many, though. And then there was a momentous occasion. My 30th birthday, August 16th, 2001. I don't know for sure what I was doing, but I was sitting, probably, it was a Thursday, I checked, so I was probably getting up in the morning, going to my English class, coming back home, sitting in front of the computer, and starting to program. But I probably did not go to Slashdot. Did anybody use Slashdot back in the day? Yeah, if I had gone to Slashdot on August 16th, these were the headlines I would have seen. Some of them might have caught my eye. 2.59 kernel release, that's Linux. Was anybody using Linux in 2001? Did you have a Linux-only install? Oh, some of you did. I know dual booting was a big deal back then. Yeah, most people did it. I couldn't get into it. I tried. This one would have caught my attention. Java to overtake C or C++. I was using Java and C, so I would have been interested in this. I mean, who wouldn't click on this one, right? But everybody sees this. You see what's coming. Somebody shared the spec at Slashdot. And as Walter put it in our interview that we did on YouTube, how many of you watched that? The conversation? Yeah. He said, poor Jan's server melted. That's the Slashdot effect. So you had all these people coming in. There was no compiler at that time, right? So people are spitballing, bike shedding, talking about the fact that D had no templates, everything Walter wrote in the spec. And they're asking, where's the compiler? They got the first version, 0.0. He started with 0 on December 9th. And you see there was a spate of releases there up to number 7, but you see he did a Microsoft. He skipped a couple numbers. And I can't find them anywhere. I can't find links or announcements or anything. But they were all there, and he was releasing them so quickly because of all the feedback. Now, you would think that with this brand new compiler, that it's just a pre-alpha basically, right? Who's actually going to use it to do anything productive, right? People you'd expect would just come around and toy with it, yeah? But people started coming. I mean, seriously, Walter built it, and they came. But there were some early hurdles, right? So first of all, it's Windows only. So if you're one of those people in 2001 who had a Linux-only desktop, you couldn't use D. You couldn't look into it. You had the OMF file format, okay? If you're just playing around with a language, no problem. But everybody knows the Windows ecosystem is PECOF, so you had to get into the object conversion so you could link. There was a learning curve. Everything's command line based. No build tools. You had to use make. If you didn't know the compile and link cycle, you couldn't use D, right? You needed a C and C+ background, or you had to pick it up. And you had all these frequent changes because it's alpha. It's changing so quickly. So who's going to use it to do anything productive? But they did. Because this was the pioneer era. The early D users were pioneers. Now this picture I read a book not too long ago called The Pioneers by David McAuliffe. It's about Marietta, Ohio, the first settlement in the Ohio River Valley in the late 18th century. And that got me thinking about all these different eras of the D community. And this really was a pioneer era. These guys had to do everything themselves. There was no ecosystem. They built it from scratch. They cut down the trees, cleared the land, built their houses, planted their farms, right? This was it. Now, to be that kind of person, you've got to have low expectations. You can't expect anything is going to exist. You've got to have a DIY ethos, do it yourself. And you've got to be a self-starter. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. I think it was Robert yesterday asked Roberto about how he managed the ecosystem and the community. And Roberto says, I don't, right? It's self-starters who got the ecosystem going in D, and it's probably the same for Lua. So if none of this applied to you, you didn't hang around, right? So it's a really interesting thing that they got going, but they did start putting stuff out there. We had tutorials, blogs, projects that people were sharing on their websites. Somebody tried to start a D journal. Anybody ever heard of Matthew Wilson? Yeah, you know, it was his book, what was his C++ book, do you remember? I can't remember, but anyway, he was a C++ guy, but he was a prolific early contributor to D. And he tried to get this online magazine going, never really took off. And we had 2 wikis just in 2002. The first one, DWiki, didn't go anywhere, but Wiki for D is still available at prowiki.org. You can still see it there. The last edit was 2014, I believe. So that was around for quite a while. Bindings, wrappers, ports. This one guy, Pavel, he had a website with dozens and dozens of bindings and utility modules and ports. Anybody ever heard of TinyPTC? Nobody, I thought so. Yeah, this was just a little pixel pushing library. It would get you a little canvas, and it had several backends. And Pavel ported 2 of the backends to D, I think it was. Oh, but this one, the GTIC Plus wrapper, okay? This started just with the name GTIC Plus wrapper, but then he changed the name to DUI, D-U-I. And then a few years later, GTIC D. And it's the same GTIC D we have today that's now maintained by Mike Way. And that started in 2002 or 2003. Libraries. Now, an interesting thing in the early D community, nobody thought in terms of libraries. Nobody thought in terms of packages. Everybody thought in terms of modules, right? So people were uploading single file modules to their websites. Socket modules, CGI modules, stream modules. The socket module, actually, that was uploaded, I think, by Christopher Miller, is the one that wound up in Phobos. You can see his name on the copyright. A lot of interest in GUIs, like the D Foundation classes. Harmonia was an HTML GUI that everybody was crazy about for a while. I remember that one. But it was only around for 2 years. And again, Matthew Wilson, he had his Synsoft libraries, a lot of utilities, and you can still see what was there now if you go to synesis.com. The website's still there. Editors and IDEs, people put syntax highlighting, Emacs D mode, D-edit, I'll get to this, dig, I think I overlooked that, did I? Dig was the D graphic interface, but he swapped the G and the I. Burton Radons. It was a wrapper for Win32. And he made a sample of the library called D-edit, and people started using that as their main D editor. And so he wound up maintaining the editor. It was created as a sample. DIDE became the go-to IDE for a while. We had tools and utilities. DLI was an early port to Linux of DMD. Walter didn't port DMD to Linux until 2003, but this got started in around February of 2002. So pretty early on, you could play around with D through DLI, even though it wasn't always up to date. Somebody started porting, giving D support to Swig. Anybody use Swig? Unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, I know back in the day it was really big for C++ and Python, but somebody added D support to it. They never completed it. I think somebody finally got it in 2007. SCons, you had tools, D-filter. You know, it's hard to find out about what these tools actually did. There's no website for them anymore. Best I can tell, D-filter and D-strip had something to do with stripping source code, not stripping the library, the binaries, but stripping the source code, like unused imports and things like that. Compile was an early build tool. All it did basically was cache object files. And we had 2 IRC channels in 2003. And so Walter recognized that this community that was growing was helping D to grow. And so he put, in June 8th, 2002, he put this post on the forums, D is gaining momentum. And it was a thank you note to these early pioneers of the D community. These guys laid the foundation for what we have today. Yeah, and it's, whenever you come to the D community, you see the state it's in. And you don't recognize that it was worse before. There was less there before, right? But people who use D, people like us, built everything up from scratch, all right? So they created the settlement, they laid a foundation, and then March 22, 2004. Now this was interesting because it doesn't seem like a big deal in retrospect, but early D compiler, I think it was dual licensed. There was an artistic license, and I think the other one was GPL, but the back end was not free. Yeah, I'm sorry.
For me personally, this project was what brought me to the.
Yeah, I was about to say some people came to D because of this. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so there were a couple of aborted attempts at getting GCC support for D, but David Friedman was successful. He worked on it for several months before he announced it, and it's the same GDC that Ian Buchla is maintaining today, right? But the D backend, it was licensed. Walter licensed his own backend from Semantic when he started the D compiler. So he was able to release the source, but it wasn't free, right? So GDC brought people in who wanted free software. And I guess that was yeah. And then this was a game changer, dsource.org. How many of you have seen dsource? How many of you used dsource when it was still active? Yeah, a few, okay. Now, why was this a game changer? Because prior to dsource, the D community was chaos, okay? It was just spread out everywhere, right? And there was no real central location for you to find D tools and projects. Now, you had the wiki, but it wasn't always updated, you know how that goes. And you had the forums, and that was it, right? But what dsource did, it gave every D project its own Subversion repository. Every D project had its own forums. Every D project had its own track system. You guys know track, the project planning. You could do milestones, tasks. It was a game changer. It took all those chaotic spread of projects and put them in a box. And all you had to do was open the lid and find what you were looking for. Yeah? And it brought the communications about the projects into one place. They weren't scattered all over the forums. The bandwidth and the server hosting were provided by Brad Anderson's company. He and JC Calvarese got it going. And that brought us to what I call the villager era. So at the villager era, you don't need to be a pioneer anymore, right? You don't have to clear your own land and farm your own food. Things are there. Somebody's going to build your house for you. If you're a doctor, you can go treat everybody. That's what happened in Marietta, Ohio. This is also Marietta, Ohio. Same settlement. So now you can have, because it's a village, you're going to have higher expectations, right? So you can expect that you don't have to do everything yourself, so you don't need that DIY ethos anymore. You don't need to be a self-starter. You don't have to find out what's missing yourself and motivate yourself to do it. People can tell you what needs to be done. You can raise your hand and say, hey, how can I help? All right? But the big thing is, in that pioneer era, everybody was a contributor. Everybody. In the villager era, everybody is a potential contributor. Yeah? And if you're not willing to contribute, you're probably going to have a hard time. But people did contribute. DWT was the first project on dsource, and it's still around. I don't know how active it is these days. Jacob Karlborg maintains it. But it was started by Brad Anderson. We had tutorials. We had an Eclipse plugin. It was the first one. There was another plugin that came later with the same name. DigDug was an early D debugger. I don't know how far it got. I don't remember. You had early support for Visual Studio IntelliSense, Decoder. DSC. How many people have heard of Mango? Yeah, okay. Then you know the story. Mango later, it was started by Chris Bell, and later became part of Tango. But it's the ancestor there. It was the D server components. Doco was an early binding to Cocoa. That was before Michel Fortin's Objective-C bridge. You had Derelict. Hello. You had DFL, D Forms Library. That was pretty cool. It was based on Windows Forms. Ares. Ares was the ancestor of D runtime that we have today. Sean Kelly started it. It was billed as a replacement for Phobos. And later that would combine with Mango to make Tango. The bindings project was kind of like Demos we have today. It was open to everybody. Anybody could contribute bindings to it. And you had DDoc, not the built-in documentation. This was a separate tool. This is before we got built-in documentation. Once we got DDoc built in, this became obsolete. But all this was happening in 2004. And then this is cool. I don't remember this, but I found this in the forum archives. It's the first announcement I can find in the D forums of a complete game written in D. And it was called Area 2048. It was written by a Japanese programmer, not the person who made the announcement, but someone else. And that was in December of 2004. But then, in January of 2005, the same person announces Torus Trooper. I'm guessing many people in here have heard Kenta Cho's name before. Yeah? Okay, some of you have. Yeah?
Can you maybe go a bit on the previous slide? We want to play the game.
Yeah, I don't think this is available for download anymore, unfortunately. But Kenta Cho's stuff is still there. Okay, now Kenta Cho was doing games in C++ and D, right? And he had a whole page full of them. He's still doing games today, right? But they're all in TypeScript and JavaScript now. So anyway, Torus Trooper was pretty big. And it turns out he had 7 games he made in D, complete games, right? From 2003 to 2006. This started bringing attention, in places where D wasn't getting attention before. GameDev.net, Flipcode.com. These are old game development communities. People were talking about him everywhere, and I think this generated a lot of interest. Now, Kenta Cho wasn't actually intending to contribute to the D ecosystem, right? I mean, he was just making games, yeah? But I'm pretty sure he brought in a lot of people. Now this one, I put this here because it's really cool. This was like drag and drop GUI development in D, in Tice Designer. I mean, this was like a Visual Basic thing. It was for the D Forms library I mentioned earlier. And I think this was maintained maybe up until 2007, I think. It never became really big, but I mean, wouldn't it be great to have something like this, today? Wouldn't it be great if it had continued? But this is the kind of thing people were doing back then. And then in 2005, we had Build. Build was the first real build tool for D. Derek Parnell released it, and I loved it. I started using it for Derelict immediately because I was happy to get rid of makefiles. And eventually people said, hey, this is a terrible name for a build system, so let's change it. So Derek did a survey. The number 1 name to replace it was dbuild. The number 2 name was Bud, and he went with number 2. And I haven't asked Zonka about this, but it seems like there's an obvious connection here, so I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, Bud was the build system. And basically you just typed bud myapp.d, and it would get all your dependencies and pull everything together, pass the command line flags based on your config file, and it just worked. And then we got a package manager, DSSS, the D Shared Software System. Now, as I recall, you made dependencies for DSSS just by typing the URL of the repository, right? I don't remember exactly how it worked, but I believe that was it. You didn't need to register it anywhere. And the guy who created DSSS, he was using Bud to do the building. DSS handled the dependencies and package management, and Bud did the building. But for reasons he never elaborated on, he said he wasn't political enough to do so. Gregor did not like Bud, so he created Rebuild, which was what DSS started using. So then we kind of had a split in the community over build tools. And in the end, people wound up maintaining config files for both of them. Yeah? It was a bit of a pain for a little while. And then there was this. November 15, 2006. Brad Roberts and I, this is Walter, have been discussing putting on the first D conference. I can't really tell you how big this was to us in words. How many of you were here at that time in 2007? Yeah, it felt like, oh my God, we've arrived. We're getting our own conference. That's what it felt like, because Amazon was involved with it, because Brad Roberts worked, I believe, at AWS. Now, if you've never heard Brad Roberts' name, he maintains he started the Bugzilla issues database and the mailing list interface for the news groups. And he lived in Seattle near Walter, and he managed to get Amazon to host the conference for us. But this post got the conversation going. Now, not long after that, we have this. It is our pleasure to announce the existence of a new application library named Tango. And this was a big deal at the time. Mango and Ares had combined. And maybe you guys know the story, maybe you don't know the story, but Phobos always had, it was kind of like the C standard library, it was a procedural API, and then you have these guys who wanted a more Java-style API, and they created Tango, and people mixed and they chose what they wanted. And I'll get to the next stage in a minute, but this got a lot of feedback. It got a lot of positive feedback, even from Walter. We all thought it was a great idea. But then this happened around the same time. In January, Walter tagged 1.0 of the decompiler, and in June, he released version 2.0 alpha. And this set the stage for the big split that we've all heard about, right? And so it wound up that if you're using D1, you were using Tango. If you're using D2, you're using Phobos. And this was a big deal in the community at the time. It hurt us pretty badly, but we got through it. And I'm not going to talk about the details because I don't know all of them. But I still hear misinformation about this today. Just a few days ago on Reddit, somebody made a comment that the Tango Phobos split was about a GC library versus a no GC library, and the GC library won. And that wasn't it at all. It was all an API thing. And then DConf actually happened in August. It happened at Amazon, and I was unable to attend. I watched it online, as I recall. And then Learn to Tango with D. That was the second book published on D. The first one was German, and that's the one that got D into Funkwerk, the German book. But Learn to Tango with D was the first English language book, and I think that brought a lot of people. And the book was picked up by a Polish university, and they were using it to teach their classes, and they hosted a Tango conference in 2008. And then we have this. 2008, we hear about the first D shops, Funkwerk and Sociomantic, and now we know Karsten was also using D at the time, and who knows who else was using it. But I think this took us out of the villager era. This is saying, look, D is not a toy language, it's serious, you can use it in production. We've arrived, we're not a village anymore, we're a town. And we're in the Townie era. And at this stage, we can't consider that everybody who comes to the D community is going to be a contributor, right? You can't consider it that way anymore. You have to think of it as people who come to the D community now are D users, right? They're clients. We can't always assume they're going to contribute. Now, nowadays, instead of, having expectations that I need to do something, they're saying, why isn't this here? Where is this? Why do we have these potholes in the road? And those are legitimate things to ask about, right? And as Robert was saying, we need not just more bodies. You said more warm bodies, but we need more contributors. Yeah. And so what our goal going forward now, we have to find ways to motivate people to say, instead of asking, why is this way, or why isn't this way, to raise their hand and try to do something about it. Yeah. So in this Townie era, we have an explosion of projects. And a lot of these are projects that we know and love today, that we're using. You had Visual D, you had the D programming language book, you had Ali's book published in 2010, and all of these were bringing new people to D. And so much more. Now, going forward, what we need is we need a way to get people not just motivated to contribute. When they do contribute, we need to follow through with them, right? So some people who join us in our monthly meetings have volunteered to serve on a ecosystem management team, all right? And that's something we're looking at getting going next year. Now, the idea is these guys will identify what are the most important projects, the most critical projects of the D ecosystem, where do we need to direct our efforts, they'll have a task list of what needs to be done. And Anybody who's interested in contributing to the D community can raise their hands and volunteer and says, hey, I'd like to help. And the management team will tell them where to go. We'll check in with them to see their progress. If life gets in the way and they have to step away and not complete their work, the management team will find somebody else to do it. That's the goal. Follow through. Yeah? Take it to the end. And that's we hear this problem all the time, this complaint that, we have no management, right? And it's like, I don't think that's completely true, but it is a legitimate complaint. And this community management team, this ecosystem management team will help get us where we want to go. Because community is everything. Without the D community, there is no D. Yeah, that's it. So right now, if anybody wants to contribute, Razvan and Dennis are our pull request and issue managers, and they're always looking for people who are willing to fix issues and help them review pull requests or whatever. So right now you can talk to Razvan and Dennis and say, hey, I want to help, how can I help? And they'll tell you what to do. And I'm done.
Hey, Mike, we got something cool to show off. So if you could remove your laptop from the display already,
Sure.
I'm going to plug mine in.
Does it work?
Yes. Needless to say, while we're doing this, question time. Raise your hands.
I actually think I used D1 until 2012, and I think the reason was that I based it all on Tango. So, and I think at that time there was sort of, you could link Tango and Phobos together or something. I remember that there was some, because before you had to either choose Phobos or Tango. At least that's what I remember.
Yeah, well, that happened, I think, because of the D1 and D2 release happening at the same time. I mean, I don't remember the split between Phobos and Tango being so bad in the beginning. And we had Gregor, who created DSSS, he created something called Tangobos, right? So if you were using, and if you're using D1, this would help you. If you're having a library or whatever, this would help you, support both libraries. And I supported both in Derelict, and it wasn't too bad for me. But I guess it depended on how much you use them. But the real split came when we got the D2 version, because then it was this clear line of Tango for D1 and Phobos for D2. Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to show off here. It turns out that it is still in Debian repositories, it still compiles, and
I was big on Tumiki fighters back in the day.
I never played that one.
yeah, hey, you guys ask questions. I'm having fun here.
Well, I guess firstly we should congratulate you for actually crossing the aisle and giving a talk, because I guess you kind of waited my entire lifetime. But one kind of hidden bit of kind of culture and history in the sort of 2006 kind of time period is that obviously Git started. Like Torvalds actually released it. So is there kind of any stories along those lines, and actually D starting to people starting to use Git?
Yeah, I don't recall exactly when we made the move to Git. I know Walter was reluctant to do it in the beginning. But, because I don't even think he was on Subversion at the time. Most D projects were on Subversion. But when he did move to Git, I know that when he moved to GitHub, that opened the door. And he later said that was one of the best decisions he made with D's development.
Does anyone want to come have a go at this?
An interesting fact about Torus Trooper, in 2020 there was someone in the forums who posted the WebAssembly port. So it's online now on torustrooper.xyz.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, all the source code for this stuff is available, right? All the D1 source for all these games. And you know, there was an Australian guy, he had a game company, I think it was called Dingo Games or something like that. He actually published a D game on Steam around 2007 or so.
I first started using D in like end of 2010. I was just super frustrated with C++, and I was just Googling for, there must be an alternative for C++, and that's how I found D. And I actually found your project, Mike, Derelict, and I still actually have a game that I had made in 2011 that was based on your library.
Yeah, Derelict was probably the most successful project. It's the only project I ever released. Yeah. You know, the thing is, when I came into D, I was into graphics programming, into games programming, but the bindings that existed, I didn't like them because I liked dynamically loading stuff, and plus they were all old and needed updating. But yeah, so I started Derelict. Yeah, Ali?
Do you have the mic there? Yeah. I really appreciate the history you put on here. It puts so much value to both to the people, the pioneers, and also the whole ecosystem, the D that we are all working for and working with. I thank you for that.
Thanks.
And as a message to my more recent forum contributors, I think they should appreciate this also. So this is not something you just jump in and some idiots are doing some wrong things. Obviously not. And I first heard about D from Andrei Alexandrescu's ACCU magazine, where he sold D in such a successful way that I just jumped in. There was no question in my mind. But for some people, they read the same stuff, they hear the same stuff, but they don't commit like I did or we do. What do you attribute this to? Is it personality difference?
Yeah, no, everybody's different. I mean, I'm not a sociologist, psychologist, or whatever, but yeah, in my experience, you know, some people are just driven to contribute. You know, some people are just driven to do. I mean, all right, I'm not driven to contribute. I don't contribute. You know, I've never contributed much code-wise. But people ask me sometimes, "Why are you here?" You know, because this is always a hobby for me. It's not my job, right? Programming was never my job. D was my hobby, right? And I have no idea why I'm here. I just like it, right? I enjoy it. I enjoy being part of the community. I enjoy doing the things I do. So I have no answer for that. And I think for some people, for some contributors, they just enjoy doing it. Those pioneers, notice that none of them are around anymore, right? None of them are around anymore. And I think that's just something in their personality. You know, they helped establish D, and then they moved on to other pioneering things somewhere else, yeah? So again, but I think in this era of our ecosystem, I think, you know, we want to be in a situation where people don't have to contribute. You know what I mean? I think that's the ultimate goal, right? But we need more contributors to get to that stage, yeah? So, but it's all about expectations. You know, Yuval Noah Harari, I probably pronounced it wrong, if you read Homo Deus, he said something that stuck with me about expectations. It's a pretty obvious thing. It's that, expectations are not based on objective reality. Or no, happiness. Happiness is not based on objective reality. It's based on expectations. We're satisfied when our expectations are met, right? But the problem is once our expectations are met, they explode. They get higher, yeah? And I think that's what it comes down to. It's what your expectations are when you come in and find it. Yeah.
So I noticed that this year the talks have been particularly good. Mm-hmm. I think a few other people have noticed this, right? And I mean, I shouldn't talk... I'll exclude mine from that, which was a bit of a mess. But so I wonder whether actually there's another era. Because I noticed your final era, the 2010s and beyond, well, you know, that was a while ago, and I think we might be entering a new era yet again. And perhaps the existence of, you know, three companies with significant numbers of developers who've been going at it for a long time. At this point, you know, it's not just like a little experiment for the first, you know, like, let's see, shall we use D? That actually marks something perhaps significant. And I don't quite know how to put this together, but there is something in that we've now had sustained industrial use that has persisted and has been successful. And then the talks have got quite good. Well, this might be the beginnings of something. I don't know.
Yeah, you might be right about that. I don't know. But the reason I stopped where I did is because the way I see it is that we kind of got out of the box that we were in, right? We went from this kind of chaos, and DSource brought us into this box. But then after that, we moved to GitHub, and we kind of got out of the box again, right? We've got all these projects scattered across the ecosystem. And you go to the Dub registry, what's a dead project, what's an active project? It's not always easy to find. And if you're a newcomer coming to D for the first time, and you see something on Dub that you like and it doesn't work, you know, how many times are you going to try until you give up and go somewhere else, and you're never even going to complain about it, right? Now, a lot of people these days are coming into Discord. How many people are using Discord? Yeah, okay. So for D. For D. All right. So yeah, this is kind of the entryway into the D community these days. It used to be the forums, the news groups, right? But now it's Discord. And I think that's a different demographic than what it used to be. And so these guys, you know, I see them sometimes complaining about, you know, oh, why doesn't this work and why doesn't that work? So that's where I'm thinking. Now, you may be right that we're in a new era, but we still need a way to get our ecosystem. I'm just focused on the ecosystem here. We need a way to get our ecosystem back into this box where it's nice and orderly and everybody knows what's going on. And that's my goal with this ecosystem management team. And Matthias is supposed to be helping me with this in the future. Yeah, shrink. Yeah, go ahead. But yeah, I mean, that's the goal, to bring order to the chaos again. What the companies are doing is bringing legitimacy, I think, yeah? But what we need is we need something for all those young guys coming in who aren't in the companies yet and are learning. And by the way, you know, our YouTube channel, I'm hoping to use that more. If anybody wants to contribute tutorials or show off projects or anything in a video on the YouTube channel, please let me know. I'll put it there, right? I'm going to start putting tutorials up there pretty soon. So.
Yeah, speaking of, we got a couple of questions up here on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
So let's start with the top one. What happened with Sociomantic Tsunami, and are there any plans to use their experience in the standard or other libraries?
Yeah, okay, I'm not the guy to talk to about plans for the standard. That would be Attila. Yeah. And what happened to Tsunami, that would be Matthias, as a former Sociomantic employee. So.
There aren't any plans, because I don't know what it does, so. Kind of hard to, you know, make any. As far as I can know, it's used for organizing dancing monkeys.
As to what happened to Sociomantic Tsunami, so Sociomantic was using D for a long time. We're using D1. We switched to D2. We open sourced a lot of our libraries and programs, so you can find it online. And then the company stopped using D because that part of the business was shut down. But all the code is still there. We use it to test DMDD runtime. It caught quite a few bugs. So I encourage everyone to take a look because it works.
It's still Linux only, right?
It is. Yeah, the standard library is Linux only. And this standard library is actually an evolution of Tango. So we took the Tango code and we ported it to D2.
I see.
And there's a question up there asking about the bounty system. Max has already said, yes, there is one. Hey, look, our bots are back on screen. Thank you. But while I'm dealing with that, okay, thanks, Steve.
I think I saw something on Slashdot that they might be
for the benefit of our live stream, not the bot, to hell with the bot, could you give us a rundown of the bounty system?
Yeah, okay. So right now we have a bounty system that we're using through our Flip Cause account. It's in a service for nonprofits. And some people have contributed money to fix certain issues in our Bugzilla. And you can contribute bounties yourself. Tell me what issues you want fixed, and I'll put a bounty up on our bounty page at FlipCause, and you can see the link on the what's it called? The donate page at dlang.org. You go to community and donate. You'll find links to the bounty page. But I should mention that we're going to move away from FlipCause pretty soon at the end of this year because it's costing us more money than it's providing a service. So we're going to ditch it so we can use some of that money for other things like the D Foundation taking over hosting of several web services in the ecosystem. That's something that's in progress right now. You know, like recently we've had issues with some things like the forums going down for a while or the release is not going out. And so once we take over the services, we'll have several people available to do admin stuff instead of everything depending on one person, you know, like Vladimir for the forums. So anyway, we want to use that money elsewhere. So we'll find another way to handle bounties. But yeah, we do put bounties on specific Bugzilla issues. And one of the bounties right now was for DLL support on Windows. So if anybody wants to look into those issues and fix that, I think we've got a few $100s on that one now. I'm not sure exactly how much it is. I'd have to go back and look.
Mike, do you still have some of your own old games from back then?
I think I completed 2. No, I don't have any of my old code. I don't have anything from back then. I never saved it. I wish I had. Yeah. So.
All right, do we have any more questions, or are we all satisfied? Nobody else want to play the game? No, I think we're done, Mike.
All right. Well, okay, you can do that if you want to. All right, now I want to thank Symmetry Investments for hosting us again this year. This is pretty amazing that they throw down the money to do this for us, and we're really grateful for it. So thanks to everybody at Symmetry for that. And I really want to say, you know, I was pretty involved in organizing this year, but all of my work was just answering emails and reading messages, basically. All of the heavy lifting and the lead work was done by Miranda Mitchell and her team back there. And I want to thank you so much, Miranda. I mean, Miranda's been awesome with this, and we owe her a lot there for that. So, Ethan, I think you have a...
Yes, we've had a mixing desk over here working tirelessly for us all conference. As you would have seen them scrambling over Robert's laptop earlier, for example. So yeah, these guys have been, you know, this conference literally would not run without them. So let's thank Mark, Canyon, and Joaquin.
And thank you for coming. Yeah?
Well, I mean, if we're going to start saying beer, we do need to mention...
Funkwerk, I'm sorry. I thought about that. I had you in my head, at least. Yeah, thanks to Funkwerk for providing money for making us all tired every morning.
I think there is one more group of people we need to thank, though, because we would not have a conference without our presenters.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for submitting. Like you saw, there were a number of first-time presenters this year. So anybody watching at home or anybody that's not done it before, I'm sure you've got something interesting you want to talk about next year. So when submissions open, go for it. And you can be up here too. So,
and I should add that you don't have to wait until next year because we're having DConf online in December.
Yes.
So please submit.
Plenty of opportunities to talk. So.